Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or seeking to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psych Reg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as clinical psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Bernie Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about needs. Yesterday we talked about wants. Today we're going to talk about needs. And we're going to kind of structure our needs talk based upon something we mentioned yesterday, which was Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Abraham Maslow.
Yeah.
Maslow. Mm-hmm.
Pretty smart guy.
Yes.
And you know, one of the things I think I'm going to say first, this is a little off script. If I'm fascinated by these guys from years past that came up with these kinds of theories and these kinds of ideas that still seem to hold true despite the advances that we've made and the way that our society and everything has changed. It's amazing to me.
I was going to say that you and I teach a variety of courses. We teach in counselor education, school psychology, education. No matter what we teach, we always teach Maslow.
Right.
And whenever you mention Maslow, the students in the class will say, yep, we've heard of Maslow. Yeah. It's one of those, it's almost a universal.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, it's always impressive when you think of this is the first person who sat down and thought about this.
Yeah.
I was reading about Einstein yesterday. That's what he did.
Yeah.
And he just sort of formulated this in his head.
Yeah.
And so this is, talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. Maslow is one of those giants.
Yeah. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that we have 5 levels of needs. And if you think about it as a triangle, and maybe we'll include a picture of it in the show notes, but when you think about this triangle, it has 5 layers.
Right.
And as you move up, we become more and more, there are needs that are...
It's a hierarchy.
It's a hierarchy. So the basic needs have to be met first.
That's
and
right.
Then you work up from there.
Right. That's right. The reason it's a triangle sits on the base. The
Right.
base of the triangle are the survival needs.
Right.
And then it gets gradually smaller as you rise up through the different layers.
Right. So the base layer is physiological.
Right.
So we're talking about survival things. So that's food and water and things like that. That things that we have to have for our body to survive.
Years ago, we had a neonatal follow-up clinic, and there was one mother in particular. She had about 7 young children, and we were always frustrated because she wouldn't do the child development exercises, and she wouldn't show up to clinic. And so finally, we had one of the social workers go to her apartment, and she had 7 young children, probably from 1 to 7 or 8. She had no refrigerator and no washer and dryer. And we were worried about her doing child development, infant and child development exercises.
Right.
Well, this woman was struggling every day to go to a grocery store to buy enough food to last for that day.
Right.
Because she had no place to store food.
Right.
Once we were able to meet her basic survival needs, then she started to engage in the stimulation activities.
Yeah.
So, they must be met first.
Absolutely. So the base is physiological survival things. The next layer up is safety.
Right.
And so this is where you're talking about shelter, clothing, those kinds of things that keep our body and ourselves safe.
Right.
So we're talking about shelter from the weather. Again, clothes would fall into that category. Just because it keeps us protected and keeps us warm and those kinds of things.
And we're talking about physical safety and emotional safety.
Correct.
That there are people who don't feel safe in their own home, or there are students who don't feel safe in a classroom. Well, if you don't feel safe in a classroom, it's very difficult for you to pay attention and attend and learn anything because you have to satisfy those safety needs first.
Right. Now, the third level up is love and belonging.
Right.
All right, so now here we're talking about, that you have to feel accepted. And so this is where we're finally getting into sort of a social domain just a little bit, where we're talking about relationships and interactions with other people.
Right.
But notice, this is the third level up.
Right. That's
okay,
right.
So after our physiological survival, comes our safety, and then finally we're getting to, or not finally because there's a couple more here, but
Right.
now we're finally getting to, I said finally again, we're getting to love and belonging, so we
right.
have our social relationships.
And that's a basic need that we have. This is a needs hierarchy. And so Maslow and William Glasser and others, other experts in these fields, consider love and belonging a need.
Right.
It's not a physiologic need. You can certainly survive if it's not met, but it is considered one of the basic needs. You have to feel like you're connected to other people.
Right, right.
Either
Now-
family, friends, coworkers, teammates,
Right.
something.
Right. Yeah, there's been plenty of research to suggest that, and we've talked about it before with attachment, that, early in life, if you don't have that love and belonging,
That's right.
that attachment, that relationship, infants do not
Can actually
survive
die,
in
right.
those in some of those kinds of
So
circumstances.
it starts in infancy,
Right.
but it continues across the lifetime.
Right.
We talk about the elderly.
Yeah.
Once families, if you're alone and you're elderly, that need for love and belonging can evaporate.
Right.
And it makes for a lonely period.
Yep. So, now the next level up from that is self-esteem.
Right.
Esteem. So is how you feel about yourself, and so. Again, so we have our survival, our safety, our social relationships, and now we have, in essence, the relationship we have with ourselves.
That's right. I have to feel good about myself. Right.
Right. And this is a basic need, but hopefully what you can see in when you have the picture that you'll be looking at, what you'll see is you can survive without it, because you have your basic physiological needs met, you have your basic safety needs met, and you can survive there.
That's right. That's right.
Now the next level up, of course, with the social piece and then the esteem piece, those are things that you don't necessarily need to survive, but one can arguably say that you need it to be psychologically healthy.
That's right. That's right. And that's, I think, when you get to you take those first two layers, but when you get to the third layer, you mentioned, then you get into these psychosocial needs.
Right.
They're just as important.
Right.
Okay. And so you get to love and belonging, and then the next step is self-esteem, how you feel about yourself. And once again, if that's damaged, if that's not working, then that becomes almost as important as the other needs, and you're going to do what you can to meet that need.
Right.
You're motivated to meet that need.
Right, absolutely. Think about somebody who's depressed, so they have very low self-esteem.
Right.
Even though they have their physiological needs met, even though they have a home to live in, they have their safety needs met, even though they have social relationships that tell them that they're important and everything, if that esteem part is poor, it is very low, then it's going to lead to depression and anxiety and some of those things that cause lots of other psychological problems.
Right. That's right.
Now, the top of the pyramid is self-actualization.
Right.
Now, what Maslow predicted, and I think that we all agree, is that very few,
That's right.
very, very few people actually reach that level
Right.
Of the needs hierarchy.
That's right. We
I think
strive.
they named a couple of people.
Right, and you would recognize their names.
Right.
Mother
Gandhi.
Teresa and
Yeah.
Gandhi and people like that. Very few people. You strive to get there.
Right.
You strive to self-actualize, but most of us never attain self-actualization.
Right. And so what self-actualization is that it's a level of understanding yourself and understanding the world in which you live that sort of is beyond yourself.
That's right. That's right.
It's you have fully actualized who you are, your position in the world, and your position in society, and so a lot of the other expectations, a lot of the other demands, a lot of the other things in life, stressors in life, sort of don't affect you as they would otherwise, because you know your purpose, you know your goal. And again, thinking about Mother Teresa and Gandhi, those are people who, were selfless. They went through those hierarchy needs of having this self-esteem, but then they got to a place where they became more or less selfless,
Right.
and were doing everything for others.
I think that's it's very difficult when we teach Maslow's needs hierarchy to explain exactly what he meant by self-actualization. But it is because Mother Teresa, for some reason, all those other needs were met.
Right.
The esteem and the love and belonging, those were all met. And then she was able to get to this other level.
Right.
And I'm not even sure that, she worked in the slums of Calcutta.
Which I think
So she was unsafe all the time.
Exactly, and that's what I think is fascinating about self-actualization, because you think about the same thing with Gandhi. It wasn't like they were. It wasn't like their physiological needs were constantly met. It wasn't like they always had a place to live with shelter, but they had reached a level where they were just beyond those other needs.
They were beyond the needs.
Right.
Whatever was, yes, that's right. It was almost that they were, that's right. Maybe a good way to put it is they were beyond those needs.
Right.
And somehow they were met, those needs were met. But it almost didn't matter because they had this other mission that they were working on.
Right. And that's why we say that very few people actually attain that level.
Even people at the top of their profession are still concerned about these others. Very few people reach that level where the other 4 levels don't seem to matter anymore. That they've somehow been superseded. We don't know, but it is a difficult concept, and very few of us get to it. But remember that what Maslow, the other important thing Maslow said to us was that we are constantly striving to meet these needs.
Right.
And most of us are busy meeting the first 4.
Right. And the last thing I think that we really want to say and talk about when it comes to these needs is, when we have, like yesterday we talked about, or in the last podcast we talked about wants. Now, if it doesn't fit into one of these, really the 4 categories, the physiological, the safety, the love and belonging, and the esteem. Right. If it doesn't fit into one of those 4, it's probably not a need.
Right. That's right. That's how you determine it. We talked about that yesterday.
Right.
If it's not a need, what do we mean by needs? Here are the 4 needs.
Right. So if it doesn't fit in there, it's probably not a need, it's a want. But when we think about the expectations that we place on other people, if you're a teacher, or if you work in a school, or if you're an employer and you have employees that aren't meeting your expectations, one of the things that we have to consider is whether or not their needs are being met.
That's right.
And not that it's necessarily our responsibility to meet their needs for them, but if you have a student in school who's not studying, who she's not doing her homework, she's not doing well on tests, and we think, well, there's something wrong with this girl. There's something wrong with this student. And then, as you said in your example earlier, if you then go to the child's home and you see that they don't have food, there's holes in the roof, or they're homeless, they're living out of their car. If some of those basic needs are not being met, if she doesn't know when her next meal is coming,
that's right.
Why does she care about her spelling test? There's no way that she can focus on her spelling test because the basic needs aren't being met. And so we really have to think about that when we're working with people, or especially children, because if those basic needs aren't being met, they're not going to meet any of our other expectations.
That's right. One of the most important things we can say to teachers, parents, employers, or any individual, when we talk about behavior, when we talk about misbehavior, for example, when I teach it, I always put miss in parentheses.
Right.
And I do that because when I'm teaching my students about how to manage behavior, change behavior, is that children behave to get their needs met. We all behave to get our needs met.
Right.
And if you're a teacher or a parent or an employer, before you judge a person's behavior, try to think about what need that person is trying to meet.
Right.
And invariably, if you can identify the need they're trying to meet, you're going to be able to come up with an intervention or a policy or some advice that will help them, help you understand why they're behaving the way that they do. Why is a person late for work? Well, what need? What need is this person trying to get? If a kid is lying to her parents to be with her boyfriend. What need is she trying? Well, she has a belonging need.
If you have a student who is getting in fights and he's mean to everybody and all that, perhaps he doesn't feel safe, and so he's trying to keep other people away because his basic safety need is not being met. So you're absolutely right. We really should run through this process first before we start assuming that there's some other issues.
What need is this child? What need is this person trying to meet?
Yeah.
And then we can come up with a way of assisting them in this process and coming up with positive ways of meeting that need.
Absolutely. So, all right. Anything else?
No.
No. Nothing else. That's it for today. If you jump onto the show notes, we'll have the a picture of Maslow's hierarchy, so you can kind of use that as a reference and see what that looks like.
Yeah, Maslow's needs hierarchy is a good thing to put in your parent or employer toolkit.
Absolutely.
It's a very useful tool to have in your kit. So we encourage you to keep this one around.
Absolutely. So, all right, that's it for today. Have a great day, and we will be back with another episode next time.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, forget to be afraid.